Hello, everyone. Happy New Year from WEDI. This is a WEDI Virtual Spotlight, how to power electronic prior authorizations through an integrated data and AI solution. This spotlight is being sponsored by Health. Before we begin, a reminder that our QA is done non-verbally through the Zoom chat function. It is now my pleasure to introduce your presenters for today, Jeremy Yoon and Joe McCaffrey with Health, and Ricky Sahu with GenHealth.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bill, and thank you to WEDI for giving us the opportunity to share with you all today. I'll go ahead and get into the introductions here. I'll go first. My name is Jeremy Yoon. I'm a senior product manager here at Health, focusing on our prior auth solution. And I've brought a good friend and colleague from Joe, if you want to say hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. And Ricky from GenHealth.
Hey guys, yeah, nice to meet you. I'm Ricky Sahu, CEO of GenHealth, and I also founded Health about 9 years ago now.
Awesome. So as we get into the agenda today, the topic is going to be on electronic prior authorizations and how you can achieve, some pretty interesting things through an integrated data and AI solution. So just to give you a little bit of a preview and roadmap of where we're going, I'm going to spend some time giving you all just a quick overview of and our prior auth solution, our EPA platform. I'm going to hand it off to Ricky for him to do the same on GenHealth. And then we'll get into the really exciting part, which is how the synergy between our two companies just really unlocks and really meaningfully transforms the prior authorization process, as well as end it off with a technical demo, just showing you a little bit of how this is going to look in the real world here. So getting off into the overview of Health, just in case, as a brief refresher, I promise it's not going to take long. I know we're here for prior authorization. As a brief refresher on Health, our mission is to enable the seamless data exchange across the healthcare ecosystem. And so for CMS 0057 specifically, we have the full compliance support for all the access APIs as well as the prior authorization APIs. So that's the payer-to-payer, patient access, provider access, et cetera. And we deliver this all in a singular, integrated solution for interoperability. So again, today we're talking about prior authorization. I did need to get it out there that we have the other APIs as well. If you're interested in learning more, please reach out to me and I can get you in contact with someone on our team to talk you through that. But getting into the meat of the conversation here today, for prior authorization, specifically, we have the approach of taking a modular platform position to the prior authorization solution. And so, we recognize that at the end of the day, the payer ecosystem in this country is huge. There are a lot of variations that can exist, especially when we think about prior authorization and the number of vendors or sometimes the lack of vendors that a particular payer may have. And so the core kind of foundation to our product offering is offering a modular platform that can be adapted to fit this wide range of needs. And this is all really buttressed by our CRD, DTR, and PAS APIs. So the FHIR APIs that we have built out according to the Da Vinci standard. And these are all built on top of our intelligent routing platform. And so, those are a bunch of fancy words to essentially say that we function as the connections and the data pipes between EHRs, provider systems, et cetera, and all the various systems, policy management systems that may be representing the payer's prior authorization ecosystem there. And so that's one of the key pieces that we recognize that, in a world where providers are able to fax or providers are able to navigate to their own web page or, type the address into their own web portal, they're able to navigate to the specific vendor if there are more than one vendors for a particular payer. But in an API-driven world where everything is kind of happening in a black box, we definitely need to have solutions that are able to take the requests that come in from the providers and intelligently route it across the payer ecosystem there. And so that's the foundational component to our modular platform. On top of that, beyond routing, we also offer a CRD server. And that, at the end of the day, is the ability for us to ingest logic from the payer, member eligibility files, and on behalf of the payer, we're able to offer that real-time CRD response. And so that includes not just whether or not prior authorization is required for a particular procedure, but also the specific member eligibility, whether or not this member is covered or not, as well as any relevant documentation or DTR FHIR questionnaire resources, et cetera, that are associated with a particular policy. Beyond that, we have a couple UI tools that we offer to help with the provider registration and the prior auth reporting experience. So for the provider component specifically, this is arguably in some ways the most critical component because providers at the end of the day are still able to, submit prior authorizations through their legacy means, faxes, portals, et cetera. And so here at OneUp, we've really invested in tooling that enables providers to easily and securely discover these particular endpoints, as well as offer some lightweight tooling and some provider education around these APIs. Ultimately, getting to the place where we don't have control over how the EHRs and the specific portals are implementing it, but up until that point, we want to make sure that providers have as much access and as much material as possible to really use this new process. And similar thing for prior auth reporting, we offer that through what we call our console experience. But this is the opportunity for payers to come in and view reporting needs, view the metrics of prior authorizations, as well as the other access APIs, and more importantly, export this data out so that at the end of the year, for those public reporting needs as a part of 0057, you're able to come to our platform, download that information, and then have that available for you for your website there. And lastly, but I'd say not least, all of our API calls on our platform are exposed in real-time data streams in various formats. And so that doesn't really have a specific use case today. The one that we think about a lot is there's a lot of potential for a payer-owned member experience or a payer-owned member app to be able to give their patients the ability to follow along with their prior authorization. But we really see this as a forward-thinking or future-thinking opportunity where we have the opportunity to modernize prior authorization through API calls. We have all this data running through our platform. And so it was only a natural step for us as a company that wants to make healthcare data exchange as seamless as possible. We are offering all of these in various kinds of forms so that they can be consumed for whatever use cases they may have. So at the end of the day, when we think about how OneUp Health and GenHealth work together, we'll get into it a little bit more later, but this is just a little bit of a simplified graphic here, just laying the foundation for what you'll see on toward the end of the call. But in this instance, you'll see example of OneUp functioning as that kind of intelligent routing or as that main proxy layer, and then sending requests over to GenHealth as the kind of main payer system there. And for OneUp, we're able to plug and play across the board. We recognize that there are a million, maybe not a million, but there are hundreds of different vendors that exist across this ecosystem. Some of them are going to be using the FHIR standard, some of them are not. And it's very much our intention to be able to really play nice with all of them. But there are moments where deep integrations like the one we have with GenHealth are really specific and really applicable. And so this is going to be my natural leading point to hand it off to Ricky for him to walk you through some of the cool stuff they're doing on their end.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so maybe taking a step back, right? There's two really big pieces of the prior auth requirements. One is the standardization or some sort of API layer that makes these PAs possible in a standardized manner. The other is to be able to return responses for prior authorizations in a timely manner. Sometimes as low as 24 hours for urgent cases or less. And then different states have different regulations around this too. So the way that we came about solving this problem is really focused on the speed and automation of the prior auth process. And we basically built three kind of like foundational technologies that help aid the automation of prior auths. The first piece is what we call a large medical model. It's been trained on about 140 million patients worth of claims data from across the United States, commercial, Medicare, and Medicaid populations. And basically, it is able to predict what happens next for a patient given their past medical history. And you can tell, you can predict different things like procedures, conditions, medications, the dollar cost of events, what provider they'll see, et cetera. Then the second piece says, what we did was we combined that large medical model with the off-the-shelf language models. and we built an adjudication agent. So this adjudication agent basically functions by taking in the text from medical policies and patient charts. And we convert those medical policies using a policy agent into the questions and the required answers and the logical decision tree that would then be used to adjudicate a prior authorization, but also be used to surface to organizations like OneUp into the FHIR questionnaires that can then be presented through like the DaVinci standard APIs, as well as the extraction of all the right CPT codes from these policies so that you can understand which, if they're not explicitly present in them, which CPTs and what administrative rules are required before you would know whether or not you need prior auth to begin with, supporting the CRD functionality. So effectively, that allows us to work off of the existing workflows today, which are largely fax or medical file upload against a text-based medical policy with very little standardized execution logic behind the scenes. So it really came down to like the lowest common denominator there. Then the third kind of major, innovation in the space that a lot of you might be hearing about recently are these browser agents. And what we found is that, you don't expect, we wouldn't expect everyone to use our application to operate their prior authorization adjudication process on day one, or maybe even ever, because there are just so many nuances in the industry with what other vendor solutions have with their tools or systems, with internal eligibility check systems, with external EHRs. There's just a whole lot of variability. And with the prior auth workflows, it's not sufficient to just get 90 or 80% of the data that's made available from maybe some of the existing APIs from the EHRs. You really need the full patient chart and the full context with the right structure. So what we built is this third piece, which allows us to operate web-based applications using an AI agent that can then take incoming, requests and complete like a patient intake, for example. It can take our adjudicated response from the patient chart and the plans policy, determine, the approval or the non-affirmation, and write that into the existing system or present it in various other applications. It can go into the plans portal and check eligibility, or go into an EHR and extract the patient chart. And we're actually having that used by both the player and the plan, both the plan and the provider side, where plans are using us to adjudicate and integrate with their existing systems, but providers are using us to submit and fill out the questionnaires for existing, plans that they work with within their EHRs. So effectively, we just require a username and password credential to operate this without really like any other IT infrastructure lift. And we're able to put these three things together to automate a large part of the prior auth burden. So yeah, Jeremy, if you don't mind going to the next slide. As I was mentioning earlier, like kind of a lot of this boils down to taking the existing policies and converting them into FHIR questionnaires. So what we do is we take PDF documents of the medical policies or web pages that list these policies. We extract the text, and then we put them into an AI agent that is able to understand what the logic of those policies are. And we'll show you guys this in a little bit. But what we do is then we create that logic and we then transform it into a FHIR questionnaire. And in this case, we pass those on to the OneUp team that will then present how that FHIR questionnaire shows up in the EHR within a smart app through the CRD and DTR workflows. And then subsequently, we can also get the extracted patient chart, and that can come in through fax. It can come in from a drag and drop that the provider does in an existing system for prior auth submissions. And we do the same thing there. We extract all the text, but we also extract images for things like a provider signature or charts that might have graphs of lab values. And then we ask an AI agent that we built to go through each of those questions and answer those questions one by one. So it's a little hard to see, but in this one, it says, is the patient age 18 years or older? So what it can do is it can answer that question, and we'll show you in a second how exactly that works. But it answers all the questions, composes the decision tree, and gives you a summary. So that's the basic approach, and it can work off of FHIR. Jeremy, if you go to the next slide, it can basically work off of FHIR binaries that we would get from the EHR through systems like OneUp. It can slipstream into existing fax payloads that the plans are getting, or manual uploads, and they all kind of route to these AI prior authorization endpoints that will either adjudicate it on the fly with an affirmation, or provide a non-affirmation that then indicates, hey, we need a human review for this. Hang on tight, and then give you the approval or denial, as soon as the human teams at the plans have reviewed it. So yeah, hopefully this gives you guys a good overview of like how the OneUp system is working, how the GenHealth system is working, and we can show you guys exactly, how this looks in practice.
Yeah, thank you, Ricky. As we get ready to tee up our demo here, as Ricky and I have been talking and preparing for this webinar and just overall about how our companies can work together, I really think that we've settled on these three core problems being the reason why it's not just one company alone or OneUp Health or GenHealth alone that can really solve and tackle these core problems here. It's the two of us, our companies working together, but in the name of FHIR, in the name of interoperability, we also recognize that it's ultimately going to take the entire healthcare ecosystem to a certain extent to work together to ultimately get to a place where we can, excuse me, meaningfully transform and modernize our prior auth solutions. So we'll just kind of walk through these briefly one by one, and then we'll get to the part where I'm sure most of us are looking forward to, which is the technical demo there. So first problem that we recognize, especially on the OneUp side, primarily being, kind of the main point of contact for a lot of CMS compliance needs, is the fact that we are now in 2026. Happy New Year, everyone, a few days late, and that we are officially less than 1 year away from the 1/1/2027 deadline for where these FHIR APIs need to be live and ready to be used. And so as a part of that, there's a lot of implementation time and there's a lot of costs as well. From our side, the biggest burden that we see is just in some ways, standing up FHIR APIs, getting all the data in the right place is still a burden. It still takes a long time. We have a lot of great ingestion pipelines to handle that, but even getting those FHIR APIs operationalized to the point where they have even an address and a URL takes a lot of effort. But I know, Ricky, on your side, as you're handling a lot more of the policy management, the creation of questionnaires, the creation of policies, there's a lot of burden and time that's wasted there. And so I'm assuming that you guys have some experiences, or maybe you can share some anecdotes on how you guys are able to speed that up using some of the tools that you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, the introduction of AI is like obviously very much transformed the world. I don't think most people realize how powerful this stuff is. But yeah, I mean, basically, we can do what would take, multiple hours for one person to do for one policy and make that like 5 minutes or less, most of which is automated. So it's really orders of magnitude that we're seeing in the difference. And yeah, I mean, please, yeah, go ahead and ask questions throughout. Like, we don't want this to be like a one-way conversation. But yeah, this one, there is uh, logic for auditing these requests all the notifications, et cetera. We can show you some of that in there. And then there's also really clear, beyond just like what those policies are asking in the question and answer, it's really clear now to see where those questions are actually coming from in the policy. So we'll show you that in a second too.
Yeah. Getting into the second problem here, lack of consistent standards. FHIR is great. I think FHIR has been monumental for our industry, but we also recognize that there are a lot of ways in which FHIR falls short, and so we believe in it, obviously, but we also recognize that it's not going to cover all the use cases, you know. And so, at the end of the day, I think when we think about how OneUp and GenHealth are able to position ourselves, it's almost like you get the best of both worlds. There are going to be situations where the FHIR APIs and maybe some of the rigidity or lack of flexibility are going to cover, let's say, 75% of your use cases. But there are still going to be that 10, 20, maybe even 50% of the time where you've got very complex policies. We're going to show you an example of that where FHIR, CQL, we really appreciate it, but we also recognize that there are certain limitations there. And so that's where, it's almost like you have to pick the right tool for the particular problem or project that you're trying to solve there. Ricky, I know you have a lot of thoughts on that as well. Just kind of curious to hear, with the audience in terms of what you think about how we can have the marriage of FHIR and also more modern technologies, and sometimes how there's a lack of flexibility, but how we can make it work by just being smart about how we're choosing which technology, when, and where.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the biggest example might be in some of these policy questions and like the application of CQL, which is, I believe, still a bit unproven. And technically, it would not be possible to answer some of these questions. I'll just give you guys one example. Does the beneficiary have plantar flexion contracture of the ankle with dorsiflexion on the passive range of motion testing of at least 10 degrees that was measured with a goniometer, right? Like that question is like, first of all, I don't even really understand what it means. But second, it is extremely difficult to codify all of that in even like medical codes and terminologies, which is largely what FHIR and CQL is querying against. And then asking that, sort of like composing the logic of that question within something like CQL is also, I will just say it, impossible. So you really need another solution there. And right now, that solution is humans, right? People do this right now. But what we also have are these amazing large language models. And we'll show you later today, like how questions like that are being answered with a very high level of accuracy, almost on par with humans. And with humans and the AIs put together, it's actually better than the human teams alone.
Yeah, totally agree with your thoughts there. And as we get into this last and final problem here, the gap between physical and electronic prior authorizations. I think you said this earlier. I love the phrase. We want to be able to slipstream into existing provider workflows. And so, here at the OneUp side, this is again why we've invested so heavily in building out the CRD, DTR, and PAS infrastructure, because at the end of the day, this is designed to be seamless. The CDS hooks, our CRD server, our routing are all designed to be, as seamless as possible. It's a provider signing an order and they get, it goes into a black box for all they know and they get a response in seconds. But we also recognize that there are moments where, doing that directly within an EHR is also not always going to be, maybe as of 1/1/27, it's not going to be the best solution there. And so just kind of final question off to you, Ricky, just your thoughts a little bit more on, maybe just that concept of making sure that we as a healthcare system, vendors, ecosystem are able to build tools that are not impeding providers, but really, slipping into their workflows and making their day-to-day lives better rather than more friction.
Yeah, I think like, there are a few different pieces here, right? One, providers don't want to go to 20 different plan
Mm-hmm.
portals, which they have to do today. And there's like an opportunity, for OneUp there to help corral, many different endpoints, just like we have on the API side of the world for patient access. So that's one big challenge that I think can be addressed by these new regulations and these APIs. The other big piece is there are, dozens of questions that have to be answered. There is this time of waiting. There is the eligibility check. There's a lot more than just like the prior auth submission and response that's required in this process that constitutes the administrative burden that both sides of the world hate. And I think a lot of that is where I think the AI pieces come in to be helpful in operating the world in the way that humans operate today. Like that is now possible for computers to do. And I think before, we had to have standards to do those things, but now we have AI to do those things. And I think, kind of bridging those two worlds and like combining them is really presenting interesting opportunities that in so many ways covers all bases, like Jeremy was saying before.
Yeah, totally agreed. Well, we're really excited to move on to the highlight of our presentation here. I'm going to slowly transition it off to Joe McCaffrey on our site to give you a little bit of a demo. What you're going to see here is two workflows. We're using a software called Nuclear that's representing an EHR. And the first workflow you're going to see is a CRD request happening. And it's actually, it's an overall pretty basic one. It's a simple one, and it's going to one up CRD server. We're making a return on that determination. We're returning a very, I'd say it's still complex, but an overall simpler version of a static questionnaire. And then we'll get into a complex situation, which we really think these are the specific areas where you would really want to consider a solution like GenHealth. So, Joe, if you're ready, I'll hand it off to you.
Sounds good. Thanks. Okay, so the first demo that we have here details CRD, which is coverage requirements discovery, and also covers DTR, documentation templates and rules. And what you have here is our mock EHR called Nuclear. And for CRD server, we are hosting what we're calling prior authorization rules. So we ingested into our data lakehouse essentially spreadsheets that say, for this line of business, for this code, CPT code, prior authorization is required. And then we're also ingesting into the data lakehouse eligibility data and also the in and out of network providers. And so what we're doing is we're translating that into CQL, which is stored in our FHIR server, which allows us to do more advanced reasoning around whether prior authorization is required or not. And so I'll start an encounter. So this is the order sign workflow. And we're going to do a procedure request. And this one I've got 97167. Occupational therapy. And I'll sign the order. And this is hitting the OneUp CRD server. And then it's verifying the eligibility of the patient, as well as some of the eligibility of the patient, as well as the location of where the service is taking place, as well as is the provider in network or out of network. And so if I go back, let's see. Let's see if I got let's see here. One more time. Sorry, I had the wrong patient. Let's try again. Encounter start. Service request. CPT code for occupational therapy. We're going to sign the order. And so this is entirely hosted by OneUp Health, this CRD server. And what we get back is that the service is under standard coverage and that the ordered service will require prior authorization. And so the next step is to go to DTR, which is documentation, templates, and rules. And we'll use the native. There's two ways to do DTR. You can use an external smart app, or the EHR themselves can render the questionnaire. And so we'll launch that. And so again, this is hosted by OneUp, and we're returning a standard questionnaire for the provider to fill out. Okay, and so the next scenario I want to show is with Marvin here. Again, we're going to, let's see, let's go to Marvin. We're going to add a visit. And so this is demonstrating our intelligent routing. And so what we ingested is what we're calling routing rules, which is essentially per line of business, per code, where do you want this request to go to a UM system? And so we have this here, bariatric surgery, and we'll save and we'll sign the order. And what this is doing is querying, we're receiving the request, we're looking at the code, and then we're querying our intelligent routing engine to tell us which UM system to send this to. And then we get a response back and then bubble that back to the EHR. And all of the data that is happening between the UM systems, OneUp, and the EHR is all being synced to our data lakehouse, so that we can have that real-time stream to payers or do analytics on that data later. And so we have the services under standard coverage. The ordered service will require prior authorization. Again, we're going to launch DTR. And this time we're getting a questionnaire from GenHealth. And we'll get that here in a second. And what you can see for this bariatric surgery is that this questionnaire is huge. It's 70 something, 76 questions that the provider will have to document and submit with the prior authorization. And so from there, our integration with GenHealth will do some really, really interesting stuff around the questionnaire.
Yeah, so
thanks, Joe.
yeah, I can go ahead and share with you guys how this can we take over on this side. And we saw some questions come in, so we can address those too. So is everyone able to see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. All right, so basically, what we do, and here's, bariatric surgery, prior auth coming in. But what we do is we effectively, are you guys seeing this policies page?
Yes, yeah, policies.
All right, cool. So basically what we've done is we have taken a medical policy from a plan, and it comes in as just the PDF, document from that organization. Here, this one's from Independence Blue Cross. This is the full bariatric surgery policy. We convert that into text. And to answer Vanessa's question, is the questionnaire for DTR customizable per client? Yeah, so basically all the questionnaires are customized per client with their specific logic, with their specific CPT codes for their population. And it is automatically generating this medical policy and questionnaire that you see here on the right-hand side with all those, 70, something questions. And what we can also see, sorry, I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger, is we can see exactly where and what parts of this medical policy were used to create this questionnaire. So, maybe this was kind of just like a definition of what that reflex is. But this is just like being created on the fly by the AIs. And what we can do then is we can also see, okay, well, this question, came from the section that was, highlighted the most. Sorry, yeah, it says up here about the age. You can see, right here around BMI greater than or equal to 40, like that question is coming from this part of the medical policy. So what we do is we basically embed every single line and sentence in the policy. We use that to help generate these questions, and then we generate the logic along all of these questions, which you can see here. So it gets pretty complex, but if they don't have it between 35 and 40, then ask for this one. If that's for people who are Asian, then it looks at if it's this, et cetera, and it goes down this whole tree, answering and deciding based on all those questions. And again, this was entirely generated by AI. And what we do know is that AI is not perfect, right? But it does get, let's just say, 80 to 90% of the way there. And then we have this policy builder that helps people, you can edit this question and make it 19 or 20 or whatever it might be, or you can go down, add new questions, whatever those questions might be. So basically, this is the way that we make sure that whatever source documents we get, whether they're administrative rules, clinical policies, something else in the middle. We also support things like gold carding with like provider NPIs and facilities, along with other kind of like demographic information that might come into that. So all of those things are basically put into these questionnaires and rules with references to external systems like a database of the NPIs, like I mentioned for gold carding. And then those are the questions that we then present back to like the OneUp side to support the FHIR questionnaire. And getting to kind of like Mina's question about unstructured data, the way that this works is for this bariatric surgery example, we get the full medical chart, which you're seeing here on the right-hand side. And what we do is we extract all of the relevant information, about, what policy ran against, who the, patient is in this case. And we can see that this adjudication took 15 seconds to run. Our recommendation is, hey, there's some issue detected. It should be looked by a human, but we don't think that it meets eligibility criteria because there's a lack of medical weight loss that is required in the policy. So what we can see is that each of these, the AI agent, the adjudication agent, then went in to answer each of these questions. So is the patient 18 years or older? So it says, hey, their date of birth is this. That means they're 42 years old, et cetera. And, we can cite exactly where we got that answer from. Similarly, is the patient's BMI greater than or equal to 40? So we say, there's 42.2 found, which is here, right here in the chart. So this is exactly how we're dealing with the unstructured data, nutrition, falls, mobility challenges, all these things that are not reflected in like as atomic values in the patient chart in the FHIR resources or in the structured extracts of data. Those are often represented in prose in the patient's chart or in the submission letter from the provider. And what we do is we basically look at that text and we work with that text. And FHIR also supports, like the EHR support the binary resources, which allow you to do these CCDA extracts, which have all the notes and other things like that. So we can also work off of those if they are sent instead of the kind of like printed off or faxed charts. So then, we continue to answer these questions, and then we see, hey, okay, well, do they have this documented history of weight loss? And what we see is here is a citation where it says, the patient denies the structured weight loss attempts, previous structured weight loss attempts, etc. So this in the decision tree was effectively an immediate denial. And what we do is we then present this information to human reviewers, the teams at the plans, and they are able to review this and either agree or disagree. But as you can see, as a human reviewer, I didn't have to go in and check every single one of these in the chart. And again, if it didn't end here, there would be another 50 questions to check. And then I can also, again, go back to the policy and see that. So this is, let's just say, near real time. It took 15 seconds to run, not quite there. But for affirmations, usually what we do is we just tell the provider right then and there, hey, yes, it's approved. The model is right now about 95.6% accurate. Humans are about 98% accurate. Humans with our AI are over 99% accurate. This is, way faster. And what we've found is, so we have some MSOs, one called GuideHealth, using us to adjudicate prior authorizations for some of the Blues plans. They, have seen a 60% reduction in the workload by employing, intelligent prior authorization solution, employing our intelligent prior authorization solution. And then other organizations that are using us for both intake and the prior auth are seeing about an 80% admin burden reduction. So this is like a win-win really around the board, or, across the board. A win for the providers because they can get more timely responses. They don't necessarily have to fill out all the questionnaires. We have other customers that are strictly using us by giving us access to their EHRs. We go in and fill out the questionnaires for them, just like we're automating in our own system here, but we do it within their EHRs. Then for the patients, obviously it's a benefit because they get much faster responses and get access to care sooner rather than waiting many weeks. And for a lot of these patients, 2 weeks can literally be like a lifetime, like literally between life and death. And then on the plan side, it's pretty clear admin burden reduction. And then again, if you're more timely with some of these things, we had a case where a patient who had breast cancer was waiting on a prior authorization. She wasn't able to stay in the hospital because of that. Prior auth was taking a long time. She got admitted to a SNF. She fell. She fractured her vertebrae. She became paralyzed. And that is not what you want from a plan's perspective either, because then the cost is quite crazy as well. So we really think that this whole industry is ready for this sort of win-win-win. And there's a lot of opportunity for both the commercial value to organizations participating, as well as the health outcomes values. I'll just share one more quick thing, an approval. So here is just another policy where everything checked out. Any one of these, all of it checked out. We're saying it's likely to approve. Here's the rationale. Same sort of deal, citations, and all that stuff in the mix. It looks like Jeremy, you have a question in the chat. or no, sorry, Bill's asking if there are other questions. Yeah, so other questions that folks have for right now?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there'll be a few that come in, but yeah, thank you, Ricky, for sharing, and especially that last example there. I think it's always good to remember that, most of us are technologists here, at least, between the three of us on the call so far. But at the end of the day, we are working in healthcare, and there are real impacts there. And so, I think at the end of the day, it is exciting to be able to see that a marriage between, two different kinds of companies focusing in on different places can ultimately really meaningfully improve the prior authorization process. We also recognize that the tool that GenHealth has may be only applicable in certain situations, and so there may be a world where they're used for your very highly, high value, high complex situations, and you have other ones that are more easily able to be codified that One Up Health is able to help you with as well. And so we're continuing to work on the integration. Right now, it's a little bit, of a manual drag and drop, but we have plans to continue to modernize it. I think, Ricky's goal, if you don't mind me saying, is we just dump the patient chart. We help them, we help you get the patient chart in some ways. And so I think the more data, that you can have in an AI tool ultimately is going to make those decisions better. So yeah, Ricky, I don't know if you have any final thoughts, and we can also wait for questions as well.
Yeah, looks like there are a couple of questions that came in. Yeah, so yeah, I can share a case study around the outcomes here. I'll just paste it into the chat. It should be public and visible for everyone. But yeah, like I mean, these are real results. Organizations are saving $1 million+ on implementing solutions like this. This is kind of like oddly, regulations feel like they will cost organizations money, but in this case, we're seeing that it's like definitely going to save money if it's done in the right way. Like we don't want, and this is because of the lessons learned. Like it would be very time consuming and expensive to take all the policies and manually transform them into decision trees and logic. Like that would take, you know, 6 months or more for a team of folks to do, considering how complicated some of these are. But again, with AI, we can do that in like week, like it's like that kind of crazy level, 2 orders of magnitude of value. Same thing like on the API layer, right? Like from a provider's perspective, if you're dealing with interfacing between 5, 7, 10 different plan portals with all sorts of different medical policies, like that's a big pain as well. So having that all centralized under one umbrella is a huge value add. So that there's beyond just like the time savings in operating this, there are also these secondary, indirect impacts, which what we actually see outweighs the direct cost savings.
Yeah, agreed. Well, as we wrap up here, I know we have a little bit of time, so I think we'll stay on, but just in case we're catching some of y'all before a late lunch break, thank you again for joining. We really enjoyed the conversation today. Ricky and I are always open to connecting. If you want to connect with both of us, feel free to contact both of us, or if you're individually interested, feel free to reach out. One Up will be at the Connectathon. If you want to see Joe and my space again next week, feel free to reach out. We'll be there testing and doing, continuing to iterate on our APIs. I know Ricky he's clearly a smart guy, so he's always interested for an awesome conversation there. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, Ricky, for joining One Up and kind of walking us through some really exciting stuff. And hopefully we'll get to see this all being used in the real world very soon. So thank you all.
Yeah, we'll stick around a little bit if there are any
Yeah.
other questions, but
Yep.
yeah, thanks
Last
everyone.
last call for questions from the audience. Ricky, Jeremy, and Joe, thank you very much once again for a fantastic presentation. And once again, this was a WEDI Virtual Spotlight, how to power electronic prior authorizations through an integrated data and AI solution. There is a question in the chat. Can you speak a bit
Yep.
more about how you're using web agents to improve the process?
Yeah. So, the big kind of like lift right now for organizations is that they don't want to, you don't want to change your workflows. You want to do what you're doing today. You don't want to have to retrain people. So, what we do is we basically integrate our application into the existing applications at a plan or a provider by simply getting the like a new account for our AI agent. So customers create a GenHealth AI account for us that we then use to go into their existing tool to um, you know take the facts that we got, upload the chart, extract all the information that we showed you we extracted, enter in the patient's name, address, date of birth, all that stuff. We then also can go into your eligibility portal, whether that's internal or external, the public facing one, log into that, make sure that the patient has eligibility. Then we'll copy that eligibility information, the copays, whatever it might be, back into whatever system you have. Then we'll take our adjudication responses, we'll compose the text, and we will either upload a PDF document, which is what some customers want us to do, or we'll go in and answer the questions in your plan, tools, or if we're on the provider side, answer the questions from an external perspective. So really, like, think about it as uh, the way that we position it is like we're your first digital employee, and you train us and you bring us on board just like you would another human on your team. You give us the same level of access and controls, but the kind of like benefit in doing it this way versus the backend API way is that usually the backend APIs don't have all the same level of access and like mutability that's supported on the front end. And then the other big difference is that from an IT implementation perspective, it's like orders of magnitude more easier to just like create a new username and password than it is to set up API keys, set up scopes, get IT teams on to integrate, all these backend systems and databases, et cetera. So we're just like going in through the front door as if we were just another employee. Yeah, so on this, like the guidelines are different. We already have like on our website, thousands of medical policies from Medicare and different plans listed. So the variations are uh, based on what medical policies that we're directed to. So if a plan has different lines of business, and the one up team directs this line of business, like let's just say CHIP or Medicare to one set of policies or another, those are tailored, those questionnaires are tailored to those specific policies. So we're not like making anything up. We literally are referencing the existing policies that cases are adjudicated against. I don't know, Jeremy, if you have something to add to that.
Yeah, and I will say too, Joe is the little bit more of a resident CQL expert here than I am, but we are able to, based on not just procedure code, but based on again location, line of business, et cetera, we're then able to make specific determinations as to which policy should apply to which prior authorization request. And so, yeah, if you want to learn more, feel free to ask a follow up or Ricky, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. Uh, so like it will triage based on line of business. So we have a few different levels. So one is, at the very kind of final piece, we'll adjudicate against a policy, whatever policy that is. But above that, we have administrative rules, and those administrative rules can actually trigger tools. So a tool, could be, or like a part of the workflow could be, check the eligibility for this patient and determine what line of business they belong to if it's not already in the patient's chart. But if it is in the patient's chart, and maybe, for example, we also have the provider in the patient's chart, right? We might know that based on this network, they require this set of policies. Based on that provider, it requires this other set of policies. And we can also do that, based on a government line of business or a commercial line of business in an automated fashion. So we're really trying to bubble this down into, how do people do it today? We just want to apply AIs to do that with humans as oversight, so that there's nothing that's really ever missed. Um, and yeah, so it will triage based on that claim line of business.
All right. Last call for questions for Jeremy, Ricky, and Joe. All right. And you can see here that their emails are here. And for those folks who left early or those who are still on, the recording and the slides will be sent to you post-event. Jeremy Yoon, Ricky Sahu, and Joe McCaffrey with One Up Health and GenHealth. Thank you guys very much for being a part of this WEDI Virtual Spotlight. Happy New Year, and we'll see you again next time.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks a lot. Take care.